Hello guys, this is Dr. Sajadwani and in this video we will discuss directive principles of state policy in brief. The directive principles of state policy are enshrined in part 4 of the Constitution of India from Article 36 to Article 51. The directive principles of state policy according to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar are a novel feature of Indian Constitution. Who was Dr. B.R. Ambedkar? Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constituent Assembly, and according to him, the directive principles of state policy are a novel feature of the Indian Constitution. The directive principles of state policy, according to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, are like the instrument of instructions. What were the instrument of instructions? These instruments of instructions were present in the Government of India Act 1935, and they were the instructions from the British government to the executive. That is, they were the instructions to Governor General and the governors. The only difference between directive principles of state policy and instrument of instructions in Government of India Act 1935 is that while the instrument of instructions were instructions to executive, the directive principles of state policy are directions to the state, which includes both the legislature and the executive. The directive principles of state policy have been derived from the Constitution of Ireland. So the idea of directive principles of state policy has been derived from the Constitution of Ireland. The directive principles of state policy promote the ideal of social and economic democracy as against the fundamental rights which promote the ideal of political democracy. That means the directive principles of state policy, they are meant to establish a welfare state. They embody the concept of a welfare state and not that of a police state. Because during the colonial period, India was a sort of a police state. But the directive principles of state policy, they seek to establish economic and social democracy, and hence they embody the concept of a welfare state. They aim at realizing the high ideals of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity as outlined in the preamble. The directive principles of state policy are a very comprehensive economic, social, and political program for a modern democratic state. Next, the directive principles of state policy are non-justiciable, unlike the fundamental rights. The fundamental rights, they are justiciable, while the directive principles of state policy and the fundamental duties, they are non-justiciable. In case of violation, you cannot seek a remedy in a court. That means they are not legally enforceable by the courts for their violation. Therefore, the government cannot be compelled to implement them. The directive principles of state policy are the principles which are fundamental in the governance of the country, and it is the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. So what are the directive principles? They are the principles which are fundamental in the governance of a country, and while a state frames the policies, the state must keep these principles in its mind. Now the question arises that since the directive principles of state policy are non-justiciable, and hence the central government or the state government, it cannot be compelled to implement them. So what is the real force behind the directive principles of state policy? It is the public opinion. It is the public opinion. So although the directive principles of state policy, they are non-justiciable, but the real force behind the directive principles of state policy is the public opinion. The directive principles of state policy and the fundamental rights, they are equally important. In Minerva Mill's case, the Supreme Court held that the Indian Constitution is founded on the bedrock of balance between the fundamental rights and the directive principles. So both the fundamental rights as well as directive principles, they are very important, and they make the very basis of our constitution. So our constitution is based on the bedrock of balance between the fundamental rights and directive principles. The directive principles, along with the fundamental rights, contain the philosophy of the constitution and the soul of the constitution. That means the philosophy of the Indian constitution contains the directive principles and fundamental rights. So, the directive principles derived from the Constitution of Ireland and the fundamental rights derived from the Constitution of USA. They form the philosophy of the Constitution. In other words, the philosophy of the Constitution has been derived from the Constitutions of Ireland and the Constitution of USA. According to Granville Austin, the directive principles and the fundamental rights, they together are the conscience of the Constitution. We all know Granville Austin. He was a political expert. He was an expert on the Indian Constitution. In his book, The Indian Constitution, Cornerstone of a Nation, he describes the directive principles and the fundamental rights as the conscience of the Constitution. So this was a brief lecture on directive principles of state policy. We will deal with the directive principles of state policy or DPSP in detail in the coming videos. Thank you for watching. Please give your valuable suggestions in the comments. Thank you so much.